Hello, it is time to look at the digestive system of our multicellular organisms. So, autotrophs, they're able to synthesize their own glucose through a process called photosynthesis. These include plants, algae, and some types of bacteria are able to do this too. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, must obtain their organic molecules from the environment around them. Why? That's the big question. Well, over time, heterotrophs with the different food sources have evolved varying and complex digestive systems. So they all have the same goal to supply the organism with organic materials that are required for energy, so mostly talking about carbohydrates, growth and repair, so protein and amino acids, insulation, fats, they have a very important role, and obviously the facilitation of important chemical reactions, so the vitamins that we consume. So, we as humans require all of the aforementioned nutrients and more. So, the component of protein is required for growth, repair, maintenance of cells. Carbohydrates is an energy or energy storage. If you're someone who's into the gym, then you've probably heard a lot about proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. All of them are important in their own ways. Fat is also a source of energy and energy storage, but it's also used to insulate and protect our internal organs. Of course, too much of any of these is not good for you. Vitamins and minerals facilitate important chemical reactions in cells. So, when you learn about enzymes later on down the track, you'll learn about how vitamins can be used to help with some of the components that are required for our enzymes to be able to operate and function. With water, of course, it keeps us hydrated and it also helps to facilitate chemical reactions in our cells. And then finally, dietary fiber, it actually does help to move food along our intestines. Failure to consume enough essential nutrients can, of course, lead to malnutrition. So, someone who is quite sickly because their body isn't actually meeting these component requirements. So we can see our digestive system in our humans here, female and male. So ingestion is when food is taken into the mouth. Digestion, food is decomposed into smaller molecules that can be absorbed. So this usually occurs around like the stomach area, but really, it kind of happens as soon as you take it in. Like once you start chomping up the food in your mouth, it is you are already kind of starting to digest it already. Absorption, so molecules that we need from this list over here. Of course, that is then absorbed into the blood. The main area that this occurs is within our small intestine. Of course, we then go through excretion, so that's coming down into our rectum and getting rid of all the stuff that we just didn't need. Each of these stages is facilitated by one or more of the organs of the digestive system, as I was kind of going through then. So, like I said, we start in the mouth. So, the process of digestion in humans begins in the mouth. As I said before, as you're already starting to bite and chew onto foods, we're already starting to break them down into smaller pieces. This particular process is called mastication, and it is an example of mechanical digestion, right? Because your teeth are actively trying to break down the food, no chemicals are being used. Um, what are the benefits of mastication. So for anacondas, like many snakes, they just swallow their prey whole. So why are we as humans any different? Well, the reason being is that in the mouth, these small bits of food are acted upon by salivary amylase. So, amylase is a type of enzyme that's excreted by our salivary glands and into the mouth. So, this enzyme begins to actually help us to digest starch. Starch is a type of sugar that we very much so need. So paratids, so 25% of salivary amylase, um, secrete immunoglobulins to help fight bacteria. Submandibular, 70% of saliva comes from here, found on the floor of the mouth. Okay. And in grooves just inside the mandible as well. These can be actually felt when you're fighting infection, when they start to swell up. And then the sublingual is where the other 5% of saliva is generated. Esophagus, not to be confused with the trachea, is a muscular tube that is approximately 25 centimeters long and 2 centimeters wide in adults. When the food is swallowed, it is pushed into the throat, otherwise known as the pharynx, and then from there it leads to the two tubes, like I said, the esophagus and the trachea. The esophagus is where everything that is not air goes. If it is air, that's going to go to our trachea. So you think, how do we make sure that we don't have the wrong thing going into the wrong hole? At this point, the epiglottis is a flap of elastic cartilage, and what this does, it's like the swinging gate that channels the correct substances down the correct passage. So this is just like I said, pushed over the trachea, which stops food from entering into our lungs where it shouldn't. So I'm sure you've eaten or drinking something and it's gone down the wrong hole. That's probably the sensation of said things going into the trachea instead of the esophagus. Um, One of my favorite words, I don't know why, peristalsis. I've always found it so fun to say. This has been embedded in my mind since year 9 science. So peristalsis is pretty much just the movement of those contracting muscles in in your esophagus that literally pushes the food down towards the stomach. So once you swallowed food, so here's a bit of food here. The smooth muscle that lines our esophagus contracts in a particular sequence, and the partly digested food, or bolus, as we can see it's called here, is pushed down towards the stomach. So going down, down, down. As I said, this process here is known as peristalsis. So this muscular control means that we don't have to rely on gravity to swallow, which means and I'm not telling you to do it unless you're really good. If you go up against a wall or something, if you were to do a handstand and eat, this means you can actually still swallow because of this process here called peristalsis. Um, so the opposite of peristalsis is called antiperistalsis, or its more common name is vomiting. Ugh, disgusting. The stomach, when it's empty, has about a volume of approximately 50 mil, or the size of a banana, but of course readily stretches when food is swallowed. So our stomach can hold about 2 liters of liquid and food materials at any one time, and this of course can take up to 3 hours to digest a meal. So again, the stomach consists of smooth muscle, okay, and epithelial tissue, so skin tissue. Epithelial tissue lines the stomach, and it also secretes digestive enzymes, HCl or hydrochloric acid, and also protective mucus. Okay, think the pH of stomachs are quite acidic, hence why we call it stomach acid. Right, and that is to help with the digestion of the food that occurs in here. Okay, but because it is so acidic, we need that protective mucus to help prevent stomach ulcers from forming. So when we do have those ulcers where food or the acidity of the stomach does manage to get through and harm our own stomach walls. So chyme, this is partially digested food. Um, it could even be a mixture of water and other digestive secretions. So this, like I said, is called chyme. Waves of peristalsis, remember that's that contracting of the smooth muscles, happen approximately every 20 seconds while there's still chyme in the stomach. Okay, so while there's still partially digested food, water, acid, and digestive secretions, we have peristalsis. And what that does is it helps to move along our digestion process. So the pyloric sphincter, that's this little bit right here, allows about 1 teaspoon of chyme at a time to exit the stomach. So this is the reason why it can take anywhere between 2 to 4 hours to empty all of the chyme into the small intestine. Chyme intestine, oh, rhymes. So the process of digestion is completed in the small intestine, and I don't know why it's called small though, because as you can see, it is very, very long, 6 meters long, in fact. The small intestine is the longest section of the alimentary canal or the gut. Again, I don't know why they call it small. Um, the undulating wall of the small intestine, it's lumen. Okay, so that's kind of um, what the surrounds of it is called. This provides a greater surface area for absorption than if it were simply just a very simple cylinder, like a smooth cylinder. We'll go into a bit more about how this increases its surface area. Remember, again, thinking back to what makes exchange surfaces so effective. But I mean, I'm going on about it. It's called the small intestine because it's small in diameter. Lame. So our small intestine, to increase surface area, is filled or lined with all of these villi. Okay, so these are just like special finger-like protrusions from the intestines. So 95% of nutrient absorption occurs here because of this villi. Like I said, the absorption mainly occurs in the small intestine. Food is moved along our small intestine by the peristalsis again, right? Similar muscle contractions to that both in the stomach and the esophagus. So it kind of like moves it along down the small intestine. We've got other accessory organs here, so the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder. These all provide us essential compounds for digestion, and these empty into the small intestine. So the pancreas secretes digestive enzymes that break down protein, fat, and carbohydrates, while the liver produces bile that breaks down fats. And then, of course, the gallbladder stores bile secreted by the liver. So, like I said, as mentioned previously, the lumen or inner wall of our small intestine is lined with these villi. However, our villi have villi. So there's these even smaller, minute finger-like projections that are covered in microvilli. So this, of course, further increases the surface area of the small intestine. So not only do you have these villi, um, we've also got microvilli. So this means that the small intestine has a surface area of around 300 square meters. That is impressive. Another thing to notice here is we've got ourselves our capillaries. So this is again what is directly trans or exchanging nutrients and stuff with the organs and everything like that. So it's important that we have a blood supply or access to blood supply, right? There's no use having this absorption if it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so it needs to be in close contact with this blood supply to allow us to be able to actually use the nutrients that we've digested. Finally, a small intestine, so products of digestion, glucose, it's absorbed through diffusion and active transport. Think glucose molecules are actually quite large, so depending on the size, you can either just diffuse across, or if it's larger, it will need active transport, and this is transported to the rest of the body via the blood. Amino acids need active transport, glycerol fatty acids need active transport, nucleotides need active transport. So if these guys all need active transport to get from out here to inside our blood, then we can probably assume that there's going to be quite a bit of mitochondria to be able to actually create enough ATP to do that. And that is it.